Have you ever felt like you're always acting? As if, even without meaning to, you're playing a role, trying to appear strong, happy, competent, or interesting, just to maintain the acceptance of others. This uncomfortable and silent feeling is more common than it seems. We live in times when image matters more than essence, and often we don't even realize that we're losing ourselves in the process. Carl Jung, one of the greatest names in psychology, called this persona the social mask we use to function in society. It is not a bad thing in itself. The problem begins when we forget that it is just a mask and start to believe that we are what we show. But what if I told you that everything starts to work out when you stop caring about what others think? That true transformation happens not when you are accepted, but when you accept yourself. In this video, we'll explore how this liberation happens. You'll understand why living in search of approval weakens you, how this armor was formed, and most importantly, how to leave it behind to live with more lightness, clarity, and authenticity. If this makes sense to you, check if you're already subscribed to the channel. This ensures that you don't miss future content and helps me to continue producing reflections like this. Now let's understand, clearly and directly, what exactly this persona is and why it is so powerful. What is persona? The root of the problem. This persona is a psychological structure that we create, often unconsciously, to adapt to the social world. It is like an invisible armor that we use to be accepted, protected, and understood. In practice, it is the version of ourselves that we consider most presentable, most confident, most correct in front of others. From an early age, we learn that certain behaviors are praised while others are punished. When a child is too spontaneous and is called naughty, he or she learns to contain his or her naturalness. When he or she shows sadness and is told to swallow your tears, he or she learns to hide his or her pain. Thus, step by step, we shape the persona. It is born from the need to belong and avoid rejection. At first, it is useful. After all, no one can live completely without social filters. We need a certain level of adaptation to work, study, and socialize. The problem begins when we identify so much with this mask that we forget who we are without it. Think about how many times you've forced yourself to fit in, maybe in a professional environment where you held back your opinions, or in relationships where you pretended to be calmer, funnier, more easygoing. All of this to maintain harmony, but at the expense of your authenticity. And here's the crux. The longer we wear this mask, the further away we become from our true selves. We start making decisions based on what others expect, rather than what we really want. We lose touch with our own desires, values, and limits. And over time, an inner discomfort sets in, a feeling of living someone else's life, as if we were just following a script written by someone other than ourselves. Jung warned that the persona can become a prison, an elegant prison, even comfortable at times, but still a prison. And the key to getting out of it begins with awareness, understanding that there is a difference between who you really are and who you have learned to appear to be. On social media, this phenomenon is even more pronounced. The feed is a showcase of the persona. We show the beautiful, successful, sociable side, but behind the perfect photos there is often loneliness, constant comparison, and fear of not being enough. This mechanism is not a personal flaw, it is a collective construct. We live in a culture that prizes appearance and ignores depth, so creating a persona is almost inevitable. The question is, do you want to continue living within it? When we stop to look at this armor, we begin to notice its limits. Yes, it has protected us for a long time, but now perhaps it is preventing something truer from blossoming. In the next chapter, we'll delve deeper into this conflict, how the constant search for approval, fueled by the persona, traps us in a cycle of anxiety and dissatisfaction, and why this cycle never seems to end, even when everything is going well on the outside. The invisible prison, when approval becomes necessity. The persona is born as a protection, but when we begin to depend on external acceptance to validate who we are, it stops being a resource and becomes a prison, an invisible prison because it has no physical walls, but it limits everything we feel, think, and do. This prison feeds on the fear of not being accepted, and this fear is subtle. Sometimes it shows up as anxiety before posting something on social media. Other times it disguises itself as self-censorship, You think something but don't say it. You feel something but pretend you don't, all to maintain your image, the image others expect of you. The problem is that this game has a cruel rule: you never win, because even when you get the approval you wanted, it doesn't last long. Soon comes the next situation, the next doubt, the next comparison, and you start all over again. It's like filling a sieve with water, a constant effort that never really satisfies. This cycle is addictive. With every like, compliment, or validation, the brain releases a dose of dopamine. It's a temporary pleasure, and so you go back for more. But deep down you end up exhausted, because maintaining the persona requires effort, an effort that consumes your mental energy, your spontaneity, your freedom. Constantly seeking approval also fuels a false sense of self. We start to believe that we are what others value in us. You're so strong, so nice, and so smart. And even when these traits are real, they become a prison if you feel like you have to maintain them all the time. This creates a painful paradox. The more you try to please, the less authentic you feel. And the less authentic you feel, the more you need approval to validate yourself. A cycle that slowly erodes your self-esteem. And the most dangerous part, sometimes we don't even realize we're in this cycle. We think we're just doing the right thing. But deep down, we're moving further and further away from who we really are. And when you live to please others, you inevitably disconnect from what truly makes you happy. This is why so many people feel empty, even though everything is going well on the outside. They have a stable career, a seemingly good relationship, an active social life, but on the inside they feel empty because they are living their lives for others, not for themselves. At this point, you may be starting to recognize these patterns in yourself, and that's great. The first step to getting out of prison is recognizing it. If this content is helping you to better see these internal traps, leave a like on the video. This shows that this type of reflection makes sense to you and helps me to take this message to more people who also need to hear it. Now let's take it a step deeper. In the next chapter, we'll talk about the real cost of living for others. What you lose, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, when your life revolves around image and approval. The price of self-denial, emptiness, fatigue, and disconnection. Living to please comes at a cost, and it's not a small one. When you spend too much time trying to be what others expect, you start to distance yourself from who you really are. And the greater that distance, the more uncomfortable you feel inside. It's like living in a house that's beautiful on the outside, but doesn't feel like home. This discomfort can manifest itself in many ways. Sometimes it's a constant mental fatigue, even when you sleep well. Other times, it's an irritation for no clear reason, a discouragement that builds up. There's also that silent feeling of something missing, even when everything seems to be on track. And that something is yourself. When we suppress ourselves to maintain our image, we begin to lose touch with our real emotions. We begin to doubt our own desires. We become indecisive. We question everything we feel. Am I exaggerating? Am I being selfish? Will they think I'm ungrateful? Little by little, we start to erase our own inner voice, the one that should guide our most important choices. And this loss doesn't just affect the emotional side, it affects relationships too. When you live behind a mask, you create superficial connections. People become close to your persona, not you. This can create a deep feeling of loneliness, even when surrounded by people. After all, what's the point of being loved if no one knows the real you? Furthermore, self-denial makes us vulnerable to manipulation. When you need someone's approval, you are willing to give in too much, tolerate too much, accept too much. And over time, this becomes a pattern. You enter into unbalanced relationships, make concessions that violate your own limits, and start to think that this is normal. This disconnect also affects your decision-making clarity. You start making decisions based on what people will think instead of what I really want. You choose the career that impresses you, the partner that pleases your family, the lifestyle that seems right. But inside you feel empty, because none of it is about you. And this is where one of the greatest dangers lies. When the pain of self-denial lasts too long, it can develop into more serious conditions, such as chronic anxiety, mild or severe depression, and imposter syndrome. The body and mind begin to show signs that they can no longer maintain the character. But there is good news. This emptiness, this tiredness, this disconnection, all of this is a warning, a call, an invitation from your essence for you to come home. And although this requires courage, it is also the beginning of a profound transformation. In the next chapter, we will talk precisely about this turning point, the moment when, after so much effort to keep up appearances, you finally realize it's not worth it anymore. And then something inside you changes, a silent but powerful snap that marks the beginning of liberation. The snap, when you realize you don't care anymore. Sometimes it's not a big event that changes everything. It's a small moment, but one that's full of meaning. A simple conversation, a phrase that gets through to you, a silence that weighs more than shouts. And suddenly you realize you can't go on living like this anymore. That's the snap. It doesn't come with fireworks. More often than not, it comes in a solitary moment when the truth imposes itself so clearly that you can no longer ignore it. It's when you understand for the first time truly that living to please others has been destroying you from the inside. And what once felt like protection, your persona, now feels like a suffocating prison. This moment can come after a deep disappointment, emotional exhaustion, or even an empty achievement. Yes, because sometimes we achieve exactly what we wanted: recognition, status, the perfect relationship, and still feel lost. And that's when something starts to change. You realize that you spent years trying to please, to avoid conflict, to appear ideal. But in doing so, you forgot about yourself. And that's what the snap is, a reminder of who you were before you started shaping yourself so much. It is also at this point that you begin to experience two things at once, and what seem like opposites: relief and fear. Relief because you finally understand that you don't have to pretend anymore. Fear because living without the mask requires courage. You start to think, what if I disappoint someone? What if they push me away? What if I regret it? But even with this fear, something inside you already knows. Continuing to pretend will cost even more. This change is not sudden. It is gradual, internal, silent, but it is profound. And from there you begin to observe yourself more closely. You begin to make different choices, small at first, but increasingly aligned with who you really are. This transition is the subject of the next chapter. We'll talk in a practical way about how to stop caring about what other people think without becoming cold or selfish. Because this isn't an escape, it's a return, a reunion with yourself. But before we move on, want to hear from you. At what point in your life did you feel this light bulb? Share it in the comments. It may be brief, it may be profound, but know that your experience can inspire others who are also going through this silent process of awakening. How to stop caring for real. Stopping caring about what others think doesn't mean becoming a cold, insensitive, or rebellious person without a cause. It's also not about living in isolation or ignoring the impact we have. It's actually about a silent and powerful change, putting your own essence at the center of your decisions, and that over time transforms everything. After the snap, the real process begins, getting out of the approval trap and learning to listen to your own voice more loudly than the external noise. But how do you do this in practice? The first step is self-awareness. You need to notice when you are acting out of fear or when you are acting out of truth. This requires honesty. For example, did you accept that invitation because you really wanted to be there, or because you were afraid of disappointing someone? Did you post that on social media because you felt like it, or because you needed to show someone something? This self-observation is not judgment, it is clarity, and it gives you back your power. Next comes recognizing your automatic patterns. We all have emotional routines that we repeat without realizing it. People who always say yes to everything. People who are always apologizing for existing. People who hide behind jokes to avoid showing vulnerability. Recognizing these patterns is the first step to breaking them. The third practice is to reclaim the value of your own opinion. It seems simple, but many of us have not been trained to listen to ourselves. From an early age, we have been molded to seek external references: teachers, parents, authorities, social networks. This weakens our internal confidence. To change this, start with small, conscious choices. What do you really want to eat, say? Not what is acceptable, but what is true for you. These micro-choices will strengthen your emotional autonomy. Another key point is learning to say no firmly and without guilt. It may feel uncomfortable at first. After all, you've spent years saying yes to avoid conflict, but with each no you say respectfully and clearly, you send a message to your subconscious. I respect myself. And that message is powerful. Over time, it changes the way you relate to yourself and the world. It's also important to redefine empathy. Being empathetic doesn't mean you have to be self-effacing. You can be sensitive to the needs of others without overcoming yourself in the process. True empathy begins when you recognize and care for your own limits. Also, start exposing yourself to the discomfort of being authentic. Say what you really think in safe conversations. Express your opinion, even if it goes against common sense. Allow yourself to not please everyone all the time. At first, this may generate reactions, strange looks, criticism, distancing yourself. But little by little, you will realize that the right people will stay. And more than that, relationships will become more genuine, deeper, and lighter. Carl Jung said, "He who looks outside dreams. He who looks inside awakens." This awakening begins the moment you stop living to maintain an image and start living from an inner truth. But be careful. Stopping caring doesn't mean becoming indifferent. It means becoming whole. It means making peace with who you are, knowing that not everyone will like it. And that's okay, because inner peace is worth more than any applause. Finally, understand that this is a process. There will be setbacks. There will be times when you find yourself falling back into old patterns. But now, with awareness, you can make different choices. And over time, living authentically will stop being an effort and become second nature. In the next chapter, we'll look at what happens when this transformation takes hold. What are the fruits of authenticity? How does life change when you finally let go of the need to appear to be something and just allow yourself to be? The power of authenticity. What changes when you let go? When you start living authentically, life stops being a constant battleground. Little by little, the need for approval gives way to inner confidence. And what used to be exhausting, forcing a character, keeping up appearances, pleasing everyone, becomes presence, lightness, and clarity. The first noticeable change is inner calm. That constant anxiety about being enough starts to subside. You no longer have to prove yourself all the time. You're no longer rushing to fit in. You're just moving in the direction of what makes sense to you. And this brings a peace that doesn't depend on your surroundings, praise, or validation. The second shift is clarity in decision-making. When you stop caring so much about what others think, you start making choices that are more aligned with your values. You say yes when you mean yes, and no when you need to say no. It sounds simple, but this coherence between what you think, feel, and do is transformative. You also start to attract more genuine relationships. When the mask falls, the people who remain are the ones who really like you, not the role you played. This can, yes, push some people away, but in return, it brings the right people closer. The exchanges become more honest, light, and deep. In addition, your emotional energy is renewed. Living a lie is exhausting. When you allow yourself to be who you are, that energy previously used to control other people's perceptions can finally be directed to creating, taking care of yourself, building. It's a return to life with more vitality. Finally, perhaps the most powerful effect, you reconnect with the meaning of your existence. When there is no longer the burden of following an external script, you can finally ask yourself, what moves me? What really matters to me? And that is when purpose begins to emerge, not as a magical mission, but as a sum of choices made with truth. Living authentically is an act of courage, but it is also an act of self-love. And when this courage becomes a habit, life responds with more fluidity, more truth, and more meaning. If this chapter inspired you or helped you see something more clearly, please like the video. It's a simple way to support this type of content and to show me that it makes sense to continue sharing reflections like this. Are you ready to drop the mask? We have reached the end of this journey, and perhaps now you are seeing more clearly the armor you were carrying, that persona shaped by expectations, fear, and the desire for acceptance. You understand that the mask was useful at some point. It protected you, helped you adapt and survive. But today, perhaps, it is preventing you from truly living. And the best part of all this is that you don't need to become someone else. You just need to start coming back to yourself. This process doesn't require rushing, just one step at a time. A no said firmly, an opinion expressed truthfully, a limit respected, a choice made with the heart. It's these small actions that will little by little reconnect you with who you really are. And when that happens, everything starts to make more sense. Silence becomes comfortable, relationships become lighter, and life becomes more yours. So I leave you with a simple yet powerful question. What mask are you ready to take off today? If this video touched you in any way, check if you are subscribed to the channel. Here we talk about inner life, authenticity, transformation, and consciousness. And your presence makes a difference. See you in the next video. Until then, keep looking within. That's where the answer lies.